Now let's look at the different types of note-taking methods. So I have put these into 5 different categories of note-taking. You have your capture focus note-taking, where the idea is you're just filtering and recording information that you've seen elsewhere. Then you have your organization-based note-taking. This is where you're putting them into categories so you understand where they fit in the bigger picture. You have your summarization note-taking. So you are taking those notes and you're actually making some condensed form of that information. So you're creating the summary. You have your understanding note-taking. So rather than just having these summary notes, you're making sense of it. You're translating it. You're interpreting it in some way. And then finally, you have your thinking-based note-taking. So this is where you actually start creating bigger insights, connecting ideas, and coming up with original thought. So let's go through these. And some of these techniques you will probably be familiar with. So capture focus note-taking methods. So we have the outline method. This is probably my favorite when it comes to making quick notes. So you organize them in bullet points, in hierarchical bullet points. So most note-taking apps will work like this. You just put an asterisk and it'll probably convert that to a bullet point, and then you just start typing point by point by point. This is great if you're in a lecture and you just want to capture those things, and then you can indent them for the subpoints and then go back out, outdent them for the new topics along that thread. Then you have the charting method. So this is where you would create multiple lists or list multiple topics in rows in a table. And then each column you would track things like the advantages and disadvantages of when you should use it or not. So I don't use that one in particular, but you may have come across that. You have the sentence method. This is where you just mainly write and write. So great for journaling. You're writing in sentences to capture the key points that is relevant to what you want to know. You've got your mind mapping. So this is where you have a node on a mind map, and then each subnode that comes out is a subpoint, and you can keep branching out. So that's a good way to zoom in and zoom out of the knowledge. Very much like the outline method, you could take the outline method and convert that to mind map and probably back again. So it's just a different visual representation. And you have bullet journaling. So similar to outlining, but you use bullet points to capture your thoughts, your tasks, your insights, and any details. So it's a mixture of task management and knowledge management. And then you've got things like daily notes, which is basically like bullet journaling, but you do it daily. So it's a way to focus your mind on what it is you want to get out of the day, do some reflection, and various things like that. So that's kind of the capture based note taking. You've got the organization based, so flow method and box method. So flow method being as you're consuming the notes, like from a lecture, you're transcribing that source material, and then use arrows to sort of annotate out. So great if you're doing like biology, for example, you want to understand the heart pumping the blood and how that goes around, or the lungs, creating bringing in oxygen and putting that into the body, and all those kinds of things. So like cause and effect type knowledge. And box method is a way to just use boxes to separate things, so you're visually organizing what it is that you're consuming. And great if you want to like add little doodles to that to just sort of amplify the kind of recall of that information. So any kind of way of visually representing in your note taking. I could use the iPad, for example, and use the pen. I love using GoodNotes. That would be how I would take those kind of notes. So I can just have it like either an app which has an infinite canvas, or like an A4 canvas where I can record those notes and then change the colors and add little doodles and all those kinds of things. Now you've got your summarization-based note-taking. So Cornell system, this is usually quite a popular one. I personally haven't used it in particular, but the idea is that you start with your header of what the subject is, and then you've got 2 columns, one 30% of the page and the other 70%. And the left column, that would be where you store the keywords and the questions, so the main kind of prompts there, and on the right hand side is the main notes that you're taking on those things, right? And then at the footer you would summarize that information, so that's what you would generally use for quick references or revision. And then if you want to take that to the next level, you could go to the Da Vinci method, and this is very similar to the Cornell, but you're adding doodles and illustrations. And if you've ever looked at the work of Leonardo da Vinci, he was a very visual sort of note taker. He loved diagrams, sketches, things like that. So that's a great way of having the summarization of the information. Now you've got your understanding-based note-taking. So I've put in the Feynman technique here, strictly not a note-taking method, more of a technique. And it's based on the principle that if you can't explain it simply, you don't know it well enough. So you're removing the jargon, you're removing the buzzwords, you keep going like why, until you can understand the core, and then everything can build from that. What's really difficult is trying to understand something where you don't know the foundations. And Richard Feynman was absolutely fantastic at doing that. He wasn't someone who was really an expert in a field. He just knew how to ask the right questions, and inadvertently became known as the expert in the fields that he was. So I absolutely love that. Then you've got the SQ3R method, which is the S, so survey, then Q for question, and then the 3 R's, read, recite, and review. And this is commonly used when reading things like textbooks. And it's a very active form of note-taking where you really have to question the material, study material, reflect on the material. So that is that next level of, really understanding the material. There are some other variations of it with SQ4R and SQ5R. Don't ask me what the other R's are, but you can easily look those up. And then you've got your thinking-based note-taking. So this is where the Zettelkasten sits. It's a free-flowing note-taking system that can adapt to your individual needs, consists of writing atomic notes, and has a workflow that helps move the notes through the system. So it's a way of having something that's more organic and living. If you take Cornell notes, those notes, once you've written them, will be the same notes for year after year. But with the Zettelkasten, it evolves and adapts to your knowledge. So it's not just a system, but is also the workflow that dictates how that evolution happens. So we'll be covering that pretty much in quite a lot of detail. That's what this course is all about. And the good thing is you can actually use other note-taking methods with the Zettelkasten, and we'll cover how that works. So you can use the capture-based note-taking. Maybe you want to use the SQ3R method to form your Zettelkasten notes. So there's a really great way of using it to mix with that. You might also hear the Zettelkasten referred to as atomic note-taking. This is the name that I have given my interpretation, my variation of it. And the idea is about the atomic nature of the notes, building up the bigger, everything's made of atoms kind of thing. You might see it referred to as smart notes, and this was popularized by Sonke Ahrens in his book, How to Take Smart Notes, which is where my journey with the Zettelkasten pretty much started. And you might see it referred to as second brain, and that's really the idea that you're taking your system and you're putting it into an externalized version of that system. So it's not in your own brain, so it's a second brain. And you might have heard of building a second brain. So that is the work of Tiago Forte, where he has a system using the power method for organizing projects, areas, having an archive for things that aren't quite relevant, and whatever the other one, projects, areas, archive, and references. So things that you want to refer to. Or resources, sorry, not references. So yeah, that isn't the same as the Zettelkasten. I think there's a model where you could sort of merge the Zettelkasten as part of a power method with the second brain, with building a second brain. But strictly speaking, they're not the same thing. So yeah, that is an overview of the different note-taking methods. Now we're going to dive into the Zettelkasten method.